In today's video, I read some of the most viral book talk books. Um, this video took me a while to make, so I would really appreciate if you left a like, left a comment, and maybe even subscribed. Every little helps, and we're currently trying to reach 100 subscribers. Um, I really hope you enjoy it, and yeah. So, I read four books for this video, and I was initially going to have segments which showed me reading throughout the the video. However, I took a bit of a while to actually get through this, and so um I completely forgot at times, and I believe there's only one clip of me reading. So I'll insert that at some point. Maybe multiple times. We'll see. We'll see. Yeah. So the first book I read was Song of Achilles, and if you aren't aware, it's a retake on the Iliad, which is a Greek mythology uh book written by Homer, I believe. And it follows uh one of the most well-known Greek um warriors, for lack of a better term, called Achilles. And this specific book retells Achilles' story, but from the point of view of his best friend, or occasionally even a lover, called Patroclus. Um, it takes the queer or homosexual tones of the Iliad and turns it into a whole love story, while still staying true to the story itself, and I really enjoyed that. It created its own masterpiece, while still, um, you know, staying true to the source material. So at first, during probably the first half of the book, I really kind of struggled to get into it. Um, Primarily because it seemed like it was just going to be another love story. No conflict or very little conflict. Um, but that changes during the second half. I don't want to give too many spoilers, and I will put up a spoiler warning or say a spoiler warning if I am going to give any spoilers, but in the best possible way I can with avoiding spoilers. There are times where you want to hate Achilles, um, because it's from a first person perspective, or well, from Patroclus's perspective. You're kind of getting an unreliable narrator sometimes, which I actually love those kind of stories where you get unreliable narrators. I find them really fun and really interesting because you don't exactly know where the story is gonna go. And yeah, in my opinion, Madeline Miller did justice to Patroclus. Um, and it was absolutely heartbreakingly beautiful. This was probably one of my favorite books that I've read for this, and possibly one of my favorite books I've read because of TikTok in a while, if not ever. Um, so needless to say, I'm glad it's TikTok viral. However, it wasn't a perfect book, and so because of that, I'm going to rate it 4 stars out of 5. So the next book I read was Girl in Pieces, and this was a book that I I didn't really know what to expect when going into it. So, if you aren't aware, Girl in Pieces follows a girl called Charlotte, or I believe she prefers Charlie, and it starts out with her being in a psych ward, and she struggles with self-harm, suicidal thoughts, um, and there is a huge trigger warning for this book if you're planning on reading it. And I wish that the trigger warning was actually more mainstream to give to people when recommending this book, especially on TikTok because it's full of children. Um, So the trigger warning is for self-harm, suicide, sexual assault, um, drug use, homelessness. It covers a huge, huge portion of realism, and it's a really hard-hitting book. Um, I believe Goodreads has it tagged as realistic fiction, which makes a lot of sense, especially when you read it. So keep that in mind. It's a very realistic book, and I'm not the biggest fan of them sometimes, but this was probably one of my more in favorite books that I've read that is realistic and covers real world scenarios. Um, I didn't really enjoy how it was written at times. I found it a bit too inconsistent. One time there'd be an entire paragraph for a page, and the next the paragraphs would be like one sentence long. So I prefer my books to be a bit more concise in, paragraph, paragraph, paragraph. And I understand why people don't do that, but that's just a personal opinion. Other people enjoy it, so you know, that's just my opinion. Um, I have mixed feelings on this. Because on one hand, I saw someone describe it as a book about hurting yourself that shows you to be kind to yourself. And I really enjoy that description of it because it's true. Um, in my opinion, it shows that people who do self-harm primarily do it due to mental pain, and that physical pain blocks out the mental pain. However, obviously it's not a good coping mechanism, and you should seek help if you do that. Um however, it's it doesn't really show the mental health system in a good light. And I understand why. I personally have no experience with the American system as I am in the UK. However, I know for a fact that the British mental health system, especially the children mental health system, is horrific, and that's what Charlie would be in because she is 17 years old. I don't know if I mentioned that she's 17 years old in the book. Um, I do wish it kind of expanded more on certain aspects. I, for example, it had quite an unsatisfying end to me. It could have been done on purpose, but it left a lot of questions I had unanswered. I really wanted to know if she managed to find a place where she felt safe. But it it doesn't really answer that question, and 100% it could be because the author wanted to leave it up to interpretation. But I don't like that. I like books that have a satisfying ending, and if they don't, it's because there's a second book. But Girl in Pieces doesn't have enough content, in my opinion, to make it a second book. The world building is very realistic, and therefore there's not really a great way to expand on it more. Um, Overall, I thought this book was okay. I thought that probably getting in contact with a professional who deals with that, who deals with the subjects in this book, whether it be a charity or, psychiatrist, someone who cares. Uh, and I'm not saying that the author, I believe their name's Kathleen Glasgow. I think that's right. I didn't write it down, and I feel really bad that I didn't. Um, um, the author definitely could have gotten in contact with people. I'm not entirely sure, but in my opinion, there were times which kind of romanticized everything, and that possibly could have been because it was from the point of view of a girl who is struggling with it. And as someone who has been in that situation, I understand that sometimes, especially when you're in that headspace, it seems like the best thing you can do. But I just wish that it didn't really remind me a lot of 13 Reasons Why, um, which I never finished reading, but I watched the first season on Netflix and that was really not handled well. Um, I mean, it was better. The Girl in Pieces was better than 13 Reasons Why, like in terms of handling issues like that, but um, it reminded me at times of it, and that's not really the thing you want to hear. Yeah. So overall, I'd rate it a 3 out of 5 stars. It could have been better, but it wasn't the worst book I read in this video. So the next book I read, very short, very sweet notes I've got here. Um it was Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. And I have to admit, this was one that I'd been meaning to read for a while. It sat in my to be read for a good at least 6 months. Um and if you aren't aware of what it's about an author. I believe she's a journalist, and she goes to interview this Hollywood actress called Evelyn Hugo, and um, it's this big thing because Evelyn wants her to write her life story, and nobody's really heard Evelyn Hugo's life story before. And obviously, as you can probably tell by the title, she has 7 husbands, or has had 7 husbands in the past, sorry. And it's really interestingly written. Each part is a different husband. It focuses on a different husband, and it starts out um being, this husband sucked to he was great, but died, I believe. There was one. I can't remember exactly. Uh, I finished reading the book in December, and it's now March. So, yeah. Um, however, my favorite part of the book was the plot twist when it came to her romance life. And spoiler alert, because I do want to speak about this, there are spoilers for this book. I'll put a little timestamp here to when you can skip to for the end of the spoilers. Got it? Good. Okay. So, it's revealed, I believe, let me find the quote, actually. So, my favorite quote in the book, and my favorite part of the book, is, this is a direct quote. Doesn't it bother you that your husbands have become such a headline story, so often mentioned that they have nearly eclipsed your work and yourself? That all anyone ever talks about when they talk about you are the 7 husbands of Evelyn Hugo. And her answer was quintessential Evelyn. No, she told me, because they are just husbands. I am Evelyn Hugo. And anyway, I think once people know the truth, they will be much more interested in my wife. The I love books that have that huge plot twist that isn't really that detrimental to the story, but it changes everything you thought you knew about a character. And that was one of those plot twists. And it was genuinely one of my favorite parts of the book. I was so shocked when I read it. Um, Overall, I highly recommend the book. I'd rate it a 5 out of 5 stars. Um, it wasn't perfect, but it was pretty close to it. And now we get on to Punk 57. If you've watched my channel before, or if you have a little nosy at my channel, you may see that I've read one of Penelope Douglas's books prior to this. Actually, that's a lie. I read Punk 57 prior to reading Credence, but I reviewed it the other way around. So, yeah. Anyway, um, This is another book that if I were to make a video about in itself, I would title it something like I regret reading this book, because I do. My first note that I have on this book is wish I hadn't read it. And that's nothing against the author's writing. It was a really well written book. However, she had the chance to call men out on sexism and instead chose to turn girls on each other, turn it into romanticizing bullying, which I really didn't like as someone who throughout school was severely bullied and has trauma relating to that nowadays. Um, I really did not enjoy this book. It's an extremely graphic novel at times, and not a in a violence way, in a sexual way. And what upsets me the most about that is, while the characters are legal, unlike in Credence for half the book, um, it's a it's I believe it's advertised as a young adult novel, and that's primarily teenagers that read that. Like, I started reading young adult novels when I was like 13. Um, and if I read that book when I was 13, I probably would have cried. It reminds me a lot of Wattpad novels, and that's both a positive and a negative. I used to really enjoy reading Wattpad novels, um, and there are some good ones out there, but it is just very odd. And what I mean by that is it promotes itself as being this romance novel. This guy, I notice how I don't care enough to actually talk about the plot of this book, because there practically is none. Um, he has a long distance friend and he loves her, but then they start talking, and it's because he learns that she's a bully, but he's a bully in himself. And it's, like I said, it's advertised as a romance novel, but it's more so an abuse novel. It it upsets me so much, and I don't want to continue speaking about this, so I'm gonna stop. Um, Overall, I rate this book a 2 out of 5. Wish I hadn't read it. It was okay. It was written surprisingly well for what it was, but the content of it, just, I can't look past the content. It's no. And that was me reading viral TikTok books. Um, it was okay. I There were some where I wish I hadn't read, as you can tell. Um, there were some which I found really enjoyable, and I would go back and read again and again. In fact, I might do that after I finish reading the Hunger Games series. Overall though, it was an interesting read. It was an interesting time even. Uh, yeah. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, please leave a like. Please subscribe. Please comment down below what you want to see more of, or what you would like to see next. Or book recommendations. Anything. Comment anything. In fact, if you got this far into the video, comment this phrase here that I'll put on screen. There we go. I'm facing the camera fully this time. Comment this phrase here. I'll come out with something funny. It's probably just gonna be a stupid word. But yeah, have a fantastic rest of your day. Bye bye.